The Selfish Giant by the Irish writer Oscar Wilde is a short story for children. In this video, I'll interpret this story as a fairy tale. Hi, I'm Sanjeev and you all are welcome to my channel. Before we begin the analysis, let's have a short glance at some of the popular fairy tales with which we are familiar. Beauty and the Beast. It is a story about a beautiful girl who falls in love with a beast who turns out to be a prince. Similarly, we have Cinderella, a story which unfolds the story of a girl who is living a difficult life, but her fortune changes when she meets a prince. Likewise, we have Puss in the Boots, a story about a cat which uses trickery and deceit to gain power, wealth, and the hand of a princess in marriage for his poor and low-born master. Coming to the Selfish Giant, how can we interpret it as a fairy tale? Well, a fairy tale by definition refers to a children's story with magical elements. As the children are the readers of a fairy tale, the main characters of a fairy tale are children, and therefore the language of the fairy tale is also simple. Similarly, a fairy tale is characterized by the use of magic and fantasy. It represents the conflict between good and bad characters, which is ultimately resolved along with the victory of good characters over the bad ones. A fairy tale has a happy ending, offering a moral lesson for the readers. In the definition and characteristics of a fairy tale, the Selfish Giant fits properly. As a fairy tale is a children's story, it presents children as the important characters. In the Selfish Giant, the children and the little boy who visit and play in the giant's garden are important characters. The story opens up with the description of the children playing happily in the giant's garden, and the story ends with the discovery of the dead giant by the children. The children are the important characters in the sense that they bring the change in the character of the giant. That is to say, they contribute to the transformation of the giant from a selfish man to a considerate and loving one. Moreover, the little boy, who appears only twice in the story, is another important character. In fact, he is none other than Jesus Christ himself, as suggested by the marks of nails on his palms and knees. That means God comes in the form of a child in the story and even takes the giant to the heaven as a reward for his love to the children. Like a fairy tale, this story is also set in past. It begins with, every afternoon, as they were coming from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. The place setting of a fairy tale is generally a magical place. The garden is the place setting of the story, where snow and frost are engaged in a conversation. The north wind and hail are wearing warm clothes and they move around the garden, and trees talk like human beings. In that sense, the garden is a magical place. As a fairy tale, this story is written in simple language which is easy enough for children to follow. The dictions are simple and the technique of dialogue has been employed to move forward the plot. Like a fairy tale, the plot of this story moves from happiness through sorrow to happiness. In the beginning of the story, the children are playing happily in the garden, climbing up the trees and listening to the songs of the birds. Their declaration How happy we are reflects their joy, happiness, and pleasure. But the return of the giant to the garden brings a sudden change in the plot, causing sorrow in the life of the children. The giant's act of building a wall around the garden and putting up a notice board, "Trespassers will be prosecuted," prevents the children from playing in the garden and forces them to play on the dusty roads, causing their sorrow and suffering. Finally, when the giant realizes his mistake, he lets the children play in the garden. For his love to the children, he is taken to the heaven by God, which paves the way for the plot to end happily. Like a fairy tale, this story incorporates magic and supernatural elements. In fact, the giant is a supernatural character. Though the giant returns after 7 years, the children playing there are still children. While going through the story, it appears that children are not affected by time, change, and decay, which is itself a magic. Though the giant grows old, the children are still children. Similarly, one can notice magic in the story when spring refuses to visit the giant's garden when it has visited other gardens of that area. As a fairy tale, this story presents the conflict between the good characters and the bad characters, in which the good characters ultimately win. The giant, representing selfishness, is a bad character, whereas the children, representing purity and innocence, are the good characters. The conflict between the giant and the children stands for the conflict between virtues and vices. The giant is transformed because of the influence of the children. He realizes that the children are the source of happiness. This realization marks the victory of good characters over the bad one. Like a fairy tale, this story also ends happily. That means this story has a happy ending. The death of the giant does not give much pain, but it is the occasion of joy, as the giant has been invited to the paradise by God himself. Like a fairy tale, this story also ends with a simple and straightforward moral lesson. Well, what is the moral lesson that we can get from this story? It is, God loves those who love others. This brings us to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. If you are new to my channel and have not subscribed my channel yet, please subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon to get notification for the latest videos and updates. Thanks for watching.